Welcome to Off the Clock, a podcast by Procino-Wells and Woodland, where we take a team-centered, family-focused approach to serving the estate planning and elder law needs of our community on the Eastern Shore. I'm Megan Seksinski, Director of Community Relationships here at the firm, and joining me today is Kelly Andreason, the Vice President of Legacy of Love. So today we're together to talk about funeral pre-planning, and I know that Kelly is going to give us a different perspective than our listeners have heard before. So some episodes in our podcast that complement today's topic of discussion are those about funeral planning with Parcel Funeral Homes and also repatriation. Parcel came back last season actually to talk about what might happen if we pass away out of the country. And so those episodes might complement what we're going to learn from Kelly today. So hi Kelly, thanks for being with us.
Hi, Megan. It's great to be here. So thankful for the opportunity and to kind of talk more about the topic of funeral planning.
Awesome. Well, I know we're going to talk business today, but before we do, I'd love for our listeners to be able to learn about you personally. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what led you, on this career path to work in funeral pre-planning.
Yeah, great question. So again, my name's Kelly Andreason. I am a mom, a wife, and a coffee lover. So I'm always, exploring different coffee shops, hanging out with my family on the weekends. But as far as my work, I got into funeral pre-planning kind of by accident. So I think that's most people in this industry. It's not really something you always are looking towards. It kind of finds you. So I started in a background of insurance and financial services, helping with families with, insurance, retirement planning, things of that nature. But one of the things that came up was funeral plans. A lot of people didn't have an actual plan. They might have insurance, money to cover funeral arrangements, but they didn't have any plans for what they wanted. Did they want a burial or a cremation? It wasn't always specified, and that put a lot of pressure on families to make those decisions. So our company created Legacy of Love Funeral Planning, and we started working to help families with making those decisions ahead of time. So that's kind of how I got into it. I didn't grow up, working in a family funeral home or anything like that, but it's been wonderful to help families plan.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Our career paths aren't always predictable. So for those who aren't familiar, if you'll do us a favor and describe what exactly funeral pre-planning is and maybe how it works, whether someone chooses to work directly with you, a pre-planning service, or directly with a funeral home of their choice.
Great. Yeah, great question. So funeral pre-planning at its core is making decisions ahead of time regarding your final arrangements. A lot of times I have people ask, well, why does it matter? I'm not going to be here anyway. And I tell them it's really not something you do for yourself. It's really something you do for your loved ones. You're correct. You're not here to maybe see the fruit of your decisions, but your family, it really is a gift to them. So when you want to do a pre-arrangement, there's a couple options. Like you mentioned, you can meet with your local funeral home. You can work with a planning service like Legacy of Love Funeral Planning. And what we do is we sit down with you, discuss what are your wishes. Do you have preferences about burial or cremation, or how much you want to spend on the funeral? By not making those decisions ahead of time, your family gets to kind of pick that stuff out, and sometimes they don't know what's the best choice, or they might pick something that they think you wanted and spend more than what you would have wanted on a funeral for them. So we sit down, talk about what are your wishes, what are your goals, what's going to be most impactful for your family too. Sometimes I talk with people and they go, I don't need a service. And when we get to talking about it, they go, you know what? My kids might need that service for the grief process. So we talk through things like that. And then after everything's been decided upon, everything for the funeral, we talk through different payment plan options that are available. You can pay for funeral arrangements upfront in advance, or there's payment plan options that you can do as well. So it's really an option for everybody with their budget, no matter which path they choose. But again, I think the biggest benefit is just making those decisions ahead of time and having a plan. And we find that that relieves families of the stress of worrying about it, whether it's for yourself or your loved ones worrying.
Yeah, really big gift for the people that we love. So when families are pre-planning and prepaying, the hope is usually that the services aren't actually used until way out in the future.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I think that's true. And so, can you talk about the typical costs of a funeral today and how that might change in all the years between planning and actually using the services?
That's a great point. And families really, that's one of the biggest questions they have is how much is a funeral? A lot of people, they may not have ever planned a funeral for someone else or have any idea of the cost. Now, an average burial can be anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. And then you still have to purchase the plot, the headstone, if they're, all of the vault. So that can easily be $10,000, $15,000, and that can vary by your area too. If you're in a higher cost of living area, those prices can increase even farther. And then for cremations, those can be typically around $3,000 to $5,000, depending again if you're going to be burying the cremains or if you're going to keep them at home. That can change the cost. So it does vary a lot by what your preferences are, and that's kind of the benefit of talking with a director, funeral director, or a counselor to help you know what the options are and the price ranges. But there are options for all price ranges, for sure.
Mhm. Awesome. And so you've touched on this already, but can you talk us through maybe in more detail the different funeral services that are available, different options that people might be considering?
Yes, that's awesome question. So there is most common is cremation or burial. That's what most people know of. There are even more options than that. So you can do what's called a green burial, which is a ecologically friendly alternative option to a traditional burial. So there's no embalming, no, sometimes not even a vault. You can placed in like a casket that is decomposed, able to be decomposed. So there are lots of different options. I would say that most people do cremation, but they don't always realize that you can still have a viewing with a cremation. You don't have to be cremated and not have a service with a viewing if you want. Burial, you can do home funerals as well. Some people don't know that that's an option. You don't have to do it at the funeral home. We see families choosing to do celebration of life versus more of a somber or traditional service. So the options are really endless. And I think what it comes down to is figuring out what is going to represent you best, what's going to help your family grieve best, and personalizing it. I think nowadays people are taking more of a positive approach to funerals rather than a kind of depressed approach, and it can vary by why and how it goes about, but we're seeing people do all sorts of crazy things. We had one client, he wanted to, after he passed, to buy put like $1,000 at the bar to buy his friends a drink. So after the funeral service, they all went to the bar and had a round on him, to keep his legacy going, kind of to do a celebratory thing. So to make it not so doom and gloom. So you can do creative things like that when it comes to your funeral too.
That's great. That's great. So I know that our offices are similar in this way. Not a week goes by that a family doesn't say, what if I move? And in our office, it's about, I'm laying an estate plan here in Delaware. What happens if I move closer to my children? What happens if I, move to Florida to sit in the sunshine the majority of the year? What happens if? And I imagine you get that question too. And so, what if a family pre-plans with you, prepays for their services, and then they move? And how do different pre-planning approaches handle relocations?
Mm, We do hear that question a lot. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people either wait to pre-plan because they're not sure where they're going to be, or a hesitancy to start. So with us in our program, it's completely portable. The family makes their arrangements ahead of time, but they can update and change that at any time. So if you live in Delaware and your family's down in Florida and 5, 10 years from now you move, that plan goes with you. So you don't have to worry about making arrangements now and then changing them later. Now, when you plan with a traditional funeral home, that plan is typically, locked in with that specific provider. There are ways to transfer it to other locations, but it can be a little bit more paperwork involved. I think you mentioned this in the beginning, but when it comes to traveling, if you travel a lot, it's important to have a travel plan protection in place as well, because the cost to get your body back from another location to your provider can be thousands upon thousands of dollars. So making sure that you have that plan in place can protect you if you do a lot of traveling to visit family. But yeah, it really depends. If you go with a local provider, it's more of a local plan. But if you want more flexibility and portability, our services tend to work well for families looking for that.
Well, that's probably a good segue to the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is to maybe try to lay out some advantages of the two opportunities for planning, working with a local funeral home, working with a service like Legacy of Love. And so portability might make that list. Can you think of any other things to keep in mind, or maybe some things that families might use to make that decision?
Good question. So there's a lot of advantages to both options, and really what it comes down to is what's best for your family. So when it comes to Legacy of Love, I think portability is one of the biggest reasons why families like to choose us. We're simple to use, simple to update and make changes. It's not locked into a specific provider. When the client passes away, the funds don't immediately go to the funeral home. There is your beneficiary that is in control to assign a portion or all of those proceeds at the time. So if funeral costs have not increased, anything left over that you planned goes to your loved one. So it's not going to be all used up immediately. So a lot of people like that. Another advantage of ours is that we do have a funeral concierge that you can have, and that person is a third-party advocate for your loved ones. They'll call the funeral home to coordinate everything, give grief support to your family, aftercare support to your loved ones as well. So that's a really nice benefit. A lot of families like having someone maybe that's kind of just their advocate on their behalf. So I think that those are some of the big reasons why people like pre-planning with us. Along with, one thing I forgot to mention was just unique funeral services. Not all funeral homes have, all the options. We're able to really create a funeral that's unique to you. And like I mentioned, green burials or home funerals or celebration of life. Sometimes families want something a little bit different that maybe a traditional funeral home doesn't quite offer. So we help with all of those family wishes as well. Now, when it comes to the traditional funeral home, there are definitely advantages working with them as well. First, they have community relationships. If you're from that area and your family all went to that funeral home, likely you have a strong community relationship that you can trust them, and that's a great reason to work with a provider like that. The next thing would probably be that they can offer guaranteed pricing. So when you choose to lock into one specific funeral home, they can typically guarantee that price will not change for your funeral. So sometimes that's important to families. Our Legacy of Love program, we don't guarantee that prices can't change because it's portable. However, we do have inflation protection. So our plans grow 2.3% each year to offset increases in price that might occur. So it depending on what your relationship is with the funeral homes in your area or what your long-term plans are, can really maybe make the difference of which route you want to go. If you're staying local and you've got a great relationship with that local provider, that might work best for you. If you're kind of flying around all over in retirement years, living your best life, and you kind of want some flexibility, sometimes Legacy of Love might make sense too.
Interesting. Those are great points. Thank you. So some families might say to you, well, I already have life insurance, so why do I really need to pre-plan or worry about prepaying? Can you speak to that objection?
Oh, yeah, we hear that all the time. And it's a valid point. I can understand where people are coming from when they say that. And when I talk to families, I like to ask them, what made you purchase that life insurance policy in the first place? sometimes people buy life insurance policies because they want to leave, assets to their family. They want to provide, pay off debt, mortgage loans, whatever it may be. So, when you take funeral costs out of that policy, that can be a significant piece of it, depending on the policy size, that maybe it wasn't what you intended for. The other thing is the whole emotional aspect. Life insurance policies provide the funds, but they don't provide any direction. So it's not helping your family with the emotional burden of planning a funeral. And that's where funeral planning can really be helpful, because you're not leaving your family guessing or arguing. I've heard story after story from families who say, maybe we had money, but my brother wanted to cremate, my sister wanted to do burial. I was stuck in the middle. We couldn't decide. We were fighting over it. So I hate to bring up those stories, but unfortunately, they're the reality in a lot of cases. So by making those decisions ahead of time, you're able to protect that. And then the other piece that a lot of people don't realize when it comes to the life insurance policies is the Medicaid piece. So big life insurance policies are great, but if you were to ever need to do a Medicaid spend down, qualify for Medicaid to cover nursing costs, sometimes those policies, depending on how they're structured, can prevent you from qualifying. So making sure you work with a good estate planning law firm that can help you strategize for that is important. But funeral plans are typically exempt from Medicaid asset, considered an asset. So that's another reason why people want to choose to have a funeral plan in addition to their life insurance policy.
Mm-hmm. Very smart. Yeah, very important strategy in our elder law work. And you're exactly right. Being able to convert what's considered an asset to something that's allowable and protected under the Medicaid regulations. Really good. So another common thing that I think our offices both experience is this sense that families just want to avoid this topic altogether. I don't want to lay an estate plan in place. I don't want to think about my potential incapacity. I don't want to think about the end of my life and what instructions should be in place. And that, of course, includes not wanting to think about the services that would be needed. And so, do you have an opinion about why so many families might feel that way and just feel reluctant to address the need?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people feel that talking about death makes it come faster, when in reality, I don't believe that's true. I can understand there is uncomfortableness when it comes to talking about planning for estate planning, final arrangements, talking about death, but kind of what I've said before is it's a gift to make these decisions ahead of time. And especially in, I'm sure, your work and my work, we see what happens when families don't talk about things and how much of a negative impact that leaves on them. So I always start conversations with the families that we work with that, look, I know this is uncomfortable and this is not fun to think about, and we'll do our best to make it, as smooth and quick as possible if it's an uncomfortable thing for you. But we're here to help. And by checking this off your to-do list, it's going to be a breath of relief for your loved ones. But yeah, I try to remind people that it's okay to talk about it. It doesn't mean that death is coming any sooner, but I completely empathize with people who are uncomfortable by the topic, and we try to make it as smooth as possible for them. And one of the reasons why a lot of families like our program and service is that you can make arrangements from the comfort of your own home. You don't have to go to a specific provider or even leave your house to be making these decisions. And sometimes people find that comfortable, being able to, be in their own space when they're talking about this stuff and making their decisions. But yeah, it is tough. It is tough.
Yeah. Hard to face those realities. We see a lot of differences generally, generationally, and just groups of people just feeling differently about being vulnerable and opening up, including to their own family members. But we share the opinion that some of those old wives' tales and superstitions are strong too. But
Yes.
yeah,
And
whatever it takes to start small and inch into those conversations is healthy.
There's cultural aspects to it too. Different cultures feel differently about death. And so being cognizant of that with the families that we work with is important too. But like you said, starting small, maybe mentioning at, the next holiday dinner table, hey, I'm starting to work on my estate plans, just wanted to let everyone know, if you guys have questions. I found with my own family making their estate plans, it was a relief to know that they were working on that.
Yes.
And it's not fun to bring up. Nobody wants to talk about it, but just little by little, you don't have to get into big details, but opening that door, I think, is a great conversation starter.
Yeah, I agree. There might be a listener right now that is listening privately, learning privately, reasoning with themselves to maybe take some of these first steps. And so, what do you think that should look like for an individual, for a family who's willing to kind of inch into this space? Should they be contacting you directly? Should they be going to their local funeral home? Should they maybe do both? What would you recommend?
Well, I always recommend educating yourself before, stepping into further decisions. So there's a lot of good resources online. Our website has lots of articles, checklists, and guides that you can use to kind of start thinking about that process and what your wishes are. But of course, it is a very overwhelming process, and most people are not experts on funerals. So working with a pre-planning counselor, whether it's through us or the funeral home, is really helpful. And you really have to do it with them because you only know so much. There's lots of aspects to funerals that you don't even know about. But as far as just getting started, I'd say just do some research. And start kind of thinking about at least the basics. Do I want to do a burial, a cremation? How much do I want to spend on a funeral? Do I have a budget, or am I comfortable? I want to throw the biggest party I can for everybody on my way out. I mean, people have different beliefs about that and wishes. So just kind of do some self searching and then schedule a call with either us or a pre-planning counselor at your local funeral home to kind of go in and say, okay, I'm ready to kind of finalize this, confirm what I've decided, maybe get asked some questions. You don't have to commit to something either. Sometimes you just need some guidance or advice. And that's where, us and funeral homes are helpful to just learning what the options are and getting more information.
And what phase do you think the average person might want to include their important family members or friends that might ultimately be involved in making sure the services happen? What do you recommend?
You're saying who should they recommend getting involved?
Well, just at what phase might I tell my loved ones, or, whether that's family or friends, whoever that important person or those important people are for me, at what point do you think it's best to include them on what you've done or what you're thinking about?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think that can vary for each person, depending if you're already working closely with a family member on a lot of your decisions, maybe, their power of attorney, they're helping you manage your finances. I think getting them involved right away makes sense because they're actively a part of that. If you're not really needing assistance from family right away, then I think that's something that maybe after you've made the plan, you can get them involved. But it really is up to you. So I tell people, if you want your family to be involved from the start, have them join in on a call, have them join in at the meeting. If it's something that you feel better doing all on your own and then saying at the end, hey, daughter, I got it done. Here's everything. You don't need to worry. That's fine too. We see families do all sorts of different times. So I hate to not give a specific answer, but I do think it's really a personal thing and you have to do what feels best for you and your family.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. And we have similar conversations. And you're right that at the end of the day, while the path might look different, it's the end result that's probably the most important. Making sure that if there's an estate plan in place, that those important people know that it exists and where to access it and how to access it when the time is right. Because if they've pre-planned with you and prepaid with you, but no one knows, then it'll be a mess when the
Yeah.
time
And
comes.
what we do with our families is when they actually create a plan, we provide them with a binder that they can take home and show to their family, this is where my arrangements are. Everything is listed here. If something happens, I'm leaving it in XYZ filing cabinet or wherever you can access it. We also have online planning portal. If you are more of a digital family, you can share that with your loved ones so they're aware. But you're 100% right. If you don't tell anyone that you've made these arrangements, it's going to be very difficult for them to enact what you wanted. So we definitely do our best to educate families on that, and we encourage them. We have a section in our planning guide about notifying family. Who should we notify after we make these arrangements? And we have that discussion because it's very easy to kind of kick the can down the road, but we don't want to miss that opportunity to tell our families what we've done to help them.
Really smart. Well, thank you again, Kelly. It's been great for you to be a guest on Off the Clock. We appreciate your time and energy and all the resources that you provided today. So,
of course, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope everyone found this helpful.
Very good. Very good. Well, thanks for being with us today on Off the Clock. If you'd like to learn more about us, visit our website at pwwlaw.com. Of course, you can contact us directly by calling 302-628-4140 or emailing info@pwwlaw.com. We're here to help you plan today to protect your families tomorrow. See you next time. Anything discussed on Off the Clock is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship. To obtain the most reliable guidance, listeners are encouraged to seek personalized advice from qualified professionals.